You ever have a moment where your brain short circuits because it can't decide whether you're being flirted with or had a proximity? That was me, standing in our tiny, slightly moldy college apartment bathroom, towel around my waist, dripping onto the tile, while my roommate Tyler leaned casually against the doorframe with that smug little grin he always wore when he was up to something. "I left you a surprise," he said, arms crossed, eyes doing that slow scan of my chest like it was no big deal. "In the shower?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He just nodded. "Go see for yourself." Now listen. Tyler and I had been roommates for almost 2 semesters, and I had survived multiple surprises from him already. Once it was a fake plastic spider on the toilet. Another time he replaced my shampoo with a bottle filled with blue Gatorade. Classic frat boy prank energy. I'd learned not to trust that smirk. But lately something had changed. And that's what made me pause. Tyler had always been a little too confident for his own good, tall, athletic, tan year-round, like he was always 5 minutes away from a beach volleyball match. But over the past month or two, our dynamic had shifted. It started small, like how he stopped closing the door when he got dressed, or how he started joining me on the couch during my late-night Netflix binges, slowly migrating closer until our thighs would touch and neither of us would move. Then came the eye contact, that long kind that hangs in the air too long to be accidental, and the compliments, random and out of nowhere. You ever think about how good you look when you're pissed off? Or that cologne actually makes you smell decent? Always said with a smirk, always with that tone. So yeah, now I left you a surprise in the shower hit different. I stepped past him cautiously, opened the bathroom door wider, and peeked in. The shower was still fogged up from his morning rinse. He always blasted it hot enough to melt skin, and the tile floor was wet, but something sat on the ledge near the soap tray. At first I thought it was another prank. A fake snake? A random kitchen utensil? But no, it was a brand new bottle of the expensive body wash I'd been eyeing at Target for weeks. The one I never bought because I couldn't justify dropping $14 on something that smelled like eucalyptus and ego. I picked it up. It was still sealed. "What's this for?" I asked, stepping back into the hallway where Tyler was still leaning like he lived there, which, technically, he did. He shrugged, looking way too casual. "Saw you sniffing it like a freak last time we went shopping. Figured I'd save you from another depression shower with that dollar store bar soap." "That's weirdly thoughtful." "Yeah, well," he said, pushing off the wall and walking past me. "I'm full of surprises." He said it over his shoulder. And that should have been the end of it, right? Except, about 5 minutes later, when I finally got in the shower, finally let the water hit my sore back, finally started lathering that stupidly good-smelling soap into my skin, I heard the bathroom door creak open again. I froze. The glass was foggy, the water loud, but I could hear the unmistakable sound of bare feet on tile. "Tyler?" I called out, voice muffled by steam and nerves. "Don't freak out," he said, like that wasn't the perfect way to make someone freak out. "I just forgot something." "The towel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. There was a pause. "Nope." I turned slightly, still behind the glass. "What'd you forget then?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, in a voice way quieter than usual, he said, "An excuse." I stood there, hands frozen mid-lather, heart pounding in my chest louder than the water hitting the tile. "An excuse?" I echoed, trying to make it sound like a joke. But it came out tight, strained. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the heat of the water mixing with the heat rising under my skin. I waited, hoping he'd laugh it off, say he was kidding, walk away like this was just another one of his messed up attempts to mess with me. But he didn't. Instead, I heard the door shut again. Not slam, just quietly click shut. I swallowed. Then his voice came again. Closer. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, and I swear I could hear him run a hand through his hair, like he always did when he was nervous. I wasn't even gonna say anything, but then I bought that body wash, and I don't know. I've been losing my mind lately. I stayed silent, unsure whether I was supposed to respond or let him keep going. The steam made the air feel thick enough to chew. I've been thinking about it too much, he continued, and his voice was more raw than I'd ever heard it. About you. That made me turn fully around, facing the blurry outline of him through the foggy glass. You've been thinking about me? I asked, heart now fully racing. He gave a dry laugh. Yeah, like constantly. And I don't know what it means. I've never thought about guys this way before. But with you, it's like everything's upside down. I leaned a hand against the tile, trying to find balance. Not just physically, but mentally. I didn't know what to say. For months, I'd been convincing myself that I was imagining the looks, the brushes of contact, the way he lingered in doorways or asked me weirdly personal questions late at night. I'd been gaslighting myself into thinking it wasn't real. But here he was, standing just feet away, in the bathroom, while I was naked in the shower, and saying all of this. What do you want, Tyler? I asked, my voice quieter now. Not challenging, just tired of dancing around it. There was a pause, a shuffle of feet, and then, softly, I want to see you. The words hit me like a truck. I stood there, pulse thudding in my ears, as I reached out and wiped a streak of fog off the glass with my hand. And there he was, still in just his towel, chest damp from lingering steam, eyes locked on mine. But they weren't cocky, not playful, not like how he usually looked at me. He looked scared, honest, like this wasn't a bit, or a prank, or a game. Then come in, I said before I could stop myself. His eyes widened slightly, just for a second, and I could see him calculating what that meant, what the implications were. But then he moved, slowly, cautiously, stepping forward and unwrapping the towel. He hung it on the hook like it was just another normal Tuesday, and then he opened the shower door. For a second, all we did was stare at each other. The water poured between us like a curtain, steam rising, skin prickling. He looked even better up close, defined lines, water beating along his collarbone, lips slightly parted like he wasn't sure what to say next. But neither was I. Still want that surprise? He asked, a flicker of the old Tyler breaking through. I swallowed hard, the words getting caught in my throat. But I nodded, because, yeah, I wanted it. Whatever the hell it was. I don't know what I thought would happen when I let him in. Honestly, part of me assumed he'd chicken out, that this was one of those impulsive Tyler moments he'd backpedal on immediately, that he'd laugh, toss a "just kidding" over his shoulder, and leave me standing in the shower alone with my confusion dripping off me like water. But he didn't. He stepped inside, slow, deliberate. The heat wrapped around both of us, and suddenly the already cramped space felt microscopic. His shoulder brushed mine as he moved under the stream, and we both flinched. Not from discomfort, just from the weight of what it meant. He turned slightly toward me, and I noticed the way his chest rose and fell just a little too fast, like he was holding his breath between every move. I stared at him, water trailing down his face, and for a second, I forgot how to speak. He looked different up close like this, so open, so unsure. His usual cocky grin was nowhere to be found. Instead, he kept licking his bottom lip like he was trying to keep it from trembling. You don't have to prove anything, I said quietly, stepping back just enough to give him space in case he needed an out. If you're just confused, I'm not, he cut in. His voice was soft but certain. I mean, I am, but not about this. Our eyes met again. You make me feel something, he continued. I don't know what to call it, but I've been thinking about it every damn night. My stomach flipped. You could have just talked to me, you know, I said, trying to keep my tone light, though my pulse was hammering. Without the shower dramatics. He cracked a small smile. Yeah, well, not exactly the kind of conversation you bring up over dinner. Hey, pass the ketchup. Also, I might be into you. Fair point. I reached out, slowly, brushing his arm with my fingers. It wasn't much, just a gentle touch to ground us both. But the way he inhaled made it feel like something more. You don't have to figure everything out right now. I said. His eyes dropped to where my hand touched his skin, then slid back up to meet mine. I'm not trying to figure anything out anymore, he said. I just want to know what it feels like if I stop fighting it. There was a long pause. The water kept falling. The steam clung to our skin. Then, like the space between us just became unbearable, he leaned in. Not fast. Not hesitant either. Just real. He kissed me like he was testing gravity. Like he wasn't sure if this was allowed, but hoped like hell it was. His lips were warm, softer than I expected, and the moment they touched mine, every single moment of tension between us made sense. This wasn't confusion. This had been coming for a while. When he pulled back, just slightly, his eyes searching mine, I could still feel the ghost of his mouth on mine. "That okay?" he asked, voice almost a whisper. I nodded, too stunned to say much else, and then I kissed him again. Harder this time, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I finally didn't have to pretend I didn't want it. We didn't say much after that, not because there wasn't anything to say, but because the words didn't matter anymore. Not right then. We stayed in the shower longer than we needed to, long past when the hot water should have run out. But it didn't. It just kept pouring over us like the universe was giving us a moment to exist without questions. Eventually, we stepped out, water pooling at our feet, towels wrapped around us but doing little to contain the electricity still buzzing in the space between us. Tyler glanced at me while rubbing his hair dry, eyes a little wide, like the reality of everything had just caught up. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, just feels like I jumped off a cliff. And I'm still midair," I snorted. "Was that supposed to be poetic?" He gave me a look. "You know what I mean." I did. We both went back to our rooms to get dressed, awkwardly, quietly, like we needed a reset. I stood in front of my mirror, towel around my waist, staring at my reflection, wondering if this was real, or if I was just gonna wake up and find out I dreamed the whole thing. But when I stepped out into the hallway 10 minutes later, Tyler was already there, fully dressed, leaning against the kitchen counter, 2 mugs of coffee in front of him. He slid one toward me as I approached. "Peace offering," he said, in case I made shit weird. I took the cup and leaned beside him. "Weird is kind of our thing," he smirked. "True. Still, this is new. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing." I took a sip and let the silence settle for a second. "You don't have to know. I'm not expecting a label. Or answers." He looked at me then, really looked. And the expression on his face wasn't one I'd seen before. Not his usual cocky amusement. Not confusion. It was calm. Like, for once, something actually made sense. "I didn't plan any of this," he said. It wasn't like I woke up today thinking, "Let me confess to my roommate in the shower." I just couldn't keep pretending. "I'm glad you didn't." He nodded, then hesitated, eyes flicking toward the window like he was mentally bracing himself for something. "There's more," he said. "Stuff I've been holding in. Stuff that's gonna sound insane, probably. Try me." He stared into his coffee like it held answers. "You know how I've dated girls like, always?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "Well," he said, exhaling. "Every time it got serious, I'd lose interest, not just bored. I mean, like my brain would shut off, like something didn't click." I stayed quiet. I didn't think much of it, just thought I wasn't the relationship type. But then you moved in, and it was like, suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about what it'd be like if I kissed you, or what it'd feel like to fall asleep next to you, or, fuck, this is embarrassing. "Tyler," he looked up. "I've thought about it too." That shut him up. For once. We stood there for another beat, the air charged but different than before, less heat, more weight. Then he asked, almost nervously, "So what now?" I didn't know. We weren't suddenly a couple. We weren't anything, technically. But the weird truth was, I didn't care. Because I wasn't wondering anymore. And neither was he. "Now?" I said. We eat cereal like nothing happened and pretend we're normal for a few hours. He laughed, tension melting from his shoulders. Deal. We moved to the couch, bowls in hand, watching some dumb reality show in silence. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was easy. It was the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. And halfway through the episode, when Tyler stretched out and let his arm fall behind me on the couch, just barely touching my shoulder, I leaned into it. Because yeah, maybe this was the start of something. Or maybe it was just two guys figuring shit out. Either way, it was ours. The next couple days were weird. Not bad weird. Not awkward weird. Just different. Tyler and I didn't talk about the shower. Not directly, anyway. There were no sit-downs, no "what does this mean" conversations. But everything had shifted. Subtle things, like the way he'd linger in the kitchen while I made coffee, standing a little closer than usual. Or how he'd pass me the remote on the couch and his fingers would brush mine. On purpose this time, he stopped closing his bedroom door, started calling me dude less. And once, I caught him staring at me while I was folding laundry like he forgot I could see him. The energy was unmistakable now. We were orbiting something. Close. Careful. Waiting for someone to make the next move. That moment came on a Thursday night. It started like most of our nights did. Some background Netflix show neither of us were really watching. Both of us sprawled on the couch like we had nowhere better to be. I had one leg tucked under me. Tyler had his feet propped on the coffee table, and we'd somehow drifted into a position where his thigh pressed against mine. Not aggressively, not intentionally, but he didn't move, and neither did I. Then, during a quiet part of the show, he turned and looked at me. Really looked. "You been thinking about it?" he asked. I didn't need to ask what it meant. "Yeah," I said. "A lot." He nodded, jaw tightening slightly like he was gearing up to say something vulnerable. "You're the only person who's ever made me feel like this." My chest tightened. I didn't expect him to say that. Not out loud. "I don't know what I'm doing," he continued, "but I know I want to figure it out. With you." I set the remote down and turned toward him. "Ty, you don't need to have it all figured out." "I don't either. But if you want to keep going, I'm here. I'm all in." His eyes flicked to my lips for a beat. Then, without another word, he leaned in and kissed me again. Like he needed to remind himself this wasn't a fluke. That I was still here. That this was still real. It felt more natural this time, more assured. He knew what he was doing now. His hand slipped behind my neck, not pulling, just holding. I let my own hand rest on his thigh, feeling the tension there, the uncertainty that was still lingering behind his steady expression. He pulled back slightly, our foreheads nearly touching. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Does this freak you out?" I let out a breath, smiling softly. "No. Honestly, it feels overdue." That made him grin. A rare, genuine one, the kind that didn't come with a punchline. And then, without another word, he stood up and offered his hand. I took it. He led me back to his room like it was the most normal thing in the world. His room was dimly lit, soft shadows cast across the walls from the desk lamp he always forgot to turn off. The bed was a little messy, the kind of lived-in that felt familiar, like he hadn't tried to make it perfect because maybe, deep down, he hoped I'd end up there eventually. We sat on the edge of it for a moment, both of us quiet. Then he spoke. "You sure?" I looked at him, at the way his eyes searched mine, the way his fingers nervously toyed with the hem of his t-shirt. I've never been more sure of anything. That was all it took. He leaned in again, slower this time, more confident. His hands found their place, one on my chest, the other sliding around my waist like he was memorizing how I felt under his touch. We kissed until our bodies melted into each other, until the space between us disappeared, until it didn't feel like roommates or confusion or hesitation anymore. It felt like something real. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was uncomfortable, not even because anything particularly wild happened. We didn't rush it. We weren't trying to prove something. We just laid there, tangled up in each other, the weight of what just happened slowly sinking in. Tyler drifted off first, his hand still resting lightly against my stomach, breath warm against the side of my neck. I kept staring at the ceiling, my mind buzzing with everything and nothing all at once. It wasn't just the fact that we'd crossed that line, it was that I felt okay. More than okay. I felt good. Right, like something that had been off balance for months, maybe years, had finally clicked into place. I guess I'd always expected moments like this to feel confusing or complicated, but lying there with Tyler's leg draped over mine, his body relaxed in a way I'd never seen before. It felt simple, easy. In the morning, I woke up before him. For once, the apartment was quiet. No blaring music from his Bluetooth speaker, no cereal bowl clanking in the sink, just soft breathing and sunlight leaking through the blinds. I turned toward him. He was on his back now, one arm above his head, the sheet half pushed down to his waist. His face was peaceful. None of the usual cocky energy, none of the sarcasm. Just him. I watched him sleep for a few minutes, trying to figure out how we were going to play this. If he'd wake up and panic. If he'd backpedal. Pretend it hadn't happened. But when he finally stirred, blinking at the ceiling, his first instinct wasn't to run. It was to roll toward me and mumble, "You stole all the blankets." I smirked. "You kicked them off, genius." His eyes finally met mine, sleepy but clear, and then he smiled. Not a smirk, a real smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning." A beat passed. Then, "So last night wasn't just a heat of the moment thing, right?" I shook my head. "Not for me." He exhaled, relieved. "Good, 'cause I was worried I was gonna wake up to an empty bed and a note saying, 'My bad, bro.'" I laughed. Very on brand for me, honestly. We stayed there for a while, lazily wrapped in blankets and sarcasm, until our stomachs started growling loud enough to interrupt the moment. Tyler sat up, stretching, and for the first time in our entire roommate history, I didn't look away when the sheet slipped down. He noticed. Grinned. "Keep looking at me like that, and we're gonna be late for breakfast." "We're already late for breakfast," I said, throwing a pillow at him. That day was the start of something new. It wasn't perfect. Of course it wasn't. There were moments when we still tripped over our words, still hesitated with the smallest things, like brushing hands in public, or figuring out how to describe each other to friends. We didn't tell anyone at first, not because we were hiding it, but because it felt good to have something that was just ours. But things didn't stay quiet forever. It started with Tyler's brother showing up unannounced one Saturday afternoon, walking into the living room while I was in one of Tyler's old hoodies. Definitely not mine, unless I suddenly grew 2 inches and started working out. He raised an eyebrow. "That yours?" Tyler, lounging beside me, didn't even flinch. "Kind of," he said casually. "We're sharing stuff now." His brother stared at him, then at me, then shrugged. "Okay, just didn't peg you for the sharing type." Tyler smirked. "Me neither." That was it. No drama, no big announcement, just a quiet shift in how we existed in the world. The night ended with the 3 of us eating takeout on the couch, and Tyler stealing fries from my plate like he'd done 100 times before. But this time, he kissed me on the cheek when I called him out. Just like that. We weren't hiding anymore. By week 3, we had settled into a rhythm. It wasn't like Tyler and I suddenly became some picture-perfect couple, walking hand in hand through campus or posting selfies with cheesy captions. We were still us, still giving each other shit over whose turn it was to do dishes, still arguing over which cereal brand was superior, still roasting each other's playlists. But there were new things too, like the way he'd bump into me while brushing his teeth just to make me smile, or how he'd rest his hand on my thigh during movie nights like it was second nature, or how he'd sneak into my room on nights he couldn't sleep, claiming my bed was less squeaky, but never leaving until morning. Sometimes, in the middle of a random Tuesday, I'd catch him looking at me with this quiet, thoughtful expression, like he couldn't believe we were real. Like he was still wrapping his head around how this thing between us had grown from tension to something stable, something good. One night, after a late dinner and an impromptu Mario Kart tournament, which I won by the way, barely, we sat out on the fire escape with beers in hand and a blanket thrown over our shoulders. The city lights blinked in the distance, and for once Tyler was quiet. "What?" I asked, nudging him with my elbow. "You look like you're doing math in your head." He exhaled, smiling faintly. Just thinking. About? He looked over at me. How none of this makes sense, and yet it does. I tilted my head, letting my knee brush against his. You having second thoughts? No, he said immediately. Not even close. I spent so long convincing myself I wasn't allowed to want something like this, and now that I have it, I'm scared I'll screw it up. You won't, I said, and I meant it. You're already better at this than I expected, he laughed. Wow, thanks. You know what I mean. He leaned over and kissed me, soft and unhurried, the way people kiss when there's no clock ticking in the background. Then he pulled back, eyes lingering on mine. I'm glad it was you, he said. That hit harder than I expected. We didn't need to unpack it right then. We didn't have to put labels on it or define where it was going. It was enough that we were here. Together. Figuring it out, one honest moment at a time. By the end of the month, our friends started picking up on it. Not because we announced anything, but because Tyler stopped pretending. He started sliding into booths beside me instead of across. He started walking home with me instead of riding with the guys. He started reaching for my hand when he thought no one was looking, and then, eventually, when they were. It wasn't dramatic, it was gradual. Natural, like maybe this was who he had always been underneath all that sarcasm and swagger. Just a guy trying to get it right, even if he had to stumble through it a bit. And when finals came and went, and summer loomed ahead of us, he turned to me one night and said, let's stay here, just us, get jobs, cook shitty pasta, and pretend we're adults. You want to live together again? He looked at me like I was dense. Dude, we already do. I smiled, leaning back on the couch, his legs tangled with mine. Okay, but I'm not doing the dishes. Fine, he said, grabbing the remote, but I'm picking the next show. We sat like that for a while, quiet, content, shoulders pressed together. And just when I thought he was about to fall asleep, he nudged me with his foot. You know the shower thing? He said. I glanced at him. Yeah? He grinned. Best surprise I've ever planned. We didn't move out that summer. Instead, we stayed. Got part-time jobs. Turned our dusty apartment into something that felt more like a home than it ever had before. The kind where 2 toothbrushes sat side by side on the sink, where takeout containers were replaced with burned pasta experiments, and where the couch became our default weekend plan. And somewhere in the middle of it all, things stopped feeling new. Not in a bad way, not like the spark had gone, but in the way that love, if that's what it was starting to become, quietly settles into your life and starts rearranging things without making a sound. Tyler was still himself, loud, sarcastic, always the guy who could talk his way out of trouble or into a discount at the corner store. But he was also more, softer with me, more open. The guy who once rolled his eyes at any kind of emotional talk now kissed me on the forehead before bed and asked how my day was, even when it was boring. We never had some big "what are we" conversation. We didn't need one. The way he looked at me when I walked into a room said more than a label ever could. There were bumps, obviously. Nights where he got quiet and I had to pull him back out of his own head. Days when he'd overthink something small and convince himself he was screwing it all up. But those moments didn't scare me. They felt honest, real, and every time he reached for my hand again, I knew we were still choosing each other. That fall, we decided to stay roommates for another year. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And yeah, we upgraded to a slightly better place. 2 bedrooms again, even though we mostly used one. The first night in the new apartment, I stepped into the shower after a long day of moving boxes and building IKEA furniture. When I pulled the curtain closed, I saw it. A new bottle of the same eucalyptus body wash, with a note taped to the side. You didn't think I'd stop surprising you, did you? I laughed out loud, shaking my head as I read it again. And then I felt arms slide around my waist from behind. Round 2? He whispered, lips brushing the back of my neck. Dude, I said, grinning, you're ridiculous. Yeah, he said, pulling me closer, ridiculously into you.